to achieve ultimate fulfillment. This is class 3, sex, sexuality, and soulmates. This course is about how to achieve ultimate fulfillment. And how could we have ultimate fulfillment if we're not fulfilled sexually, if we're not connected to our own sexuality, and if we don't have an understanding of what a soulmate is, soulmate contract. Very, very important to know what that is. So let's start with sex. It's important to understand that when we come into a sexual relationship, first of all, sex is different than lovemaking. Okay, and we're going to get into some of the differences of what that is. Lovemaking should be the path, the journey, and sex should be a place where we come to along that journey. But it should never be expected or anticipated or demanded, but rather it's a place that we come to. But before we get to that place, let's go back to sex. The first thing that we look at when we look at sex is we look at the pain body, okay? If I have emotional trauma, physical trauma, psychological trauma, spiritual trauma, or social trauma around sex, that's a pain body for me. And that's a pain body that I bring into every sexual relationship that I have. So it's important for us to look at our personal relationship with sex. How has the upbringing, or how have the words and the teachings of my parents and my grandparents, or maybe other matriarchal, patriarchal figures in your life, how have they impacted your view on sex? You know, and is that something that you truly want to identify with? You know, like for example, in some cultures, a man offering a woman oral pleasure is seen as something unmasculine. And in some other cultures or social settings or social structures, it may be seen that a woman giving a man oral pleasure is something foul. You know, and those are just examples of that I'm offering you for you to look at. What are the teachings in your life? You know, does the man always have to perform like a stud? Is that something that you were taught or that you learned along the way? Does the woman always have to? Oh, there's a word that begins with the letter C, but how could I forget this word? Anyway, you know, is the woman obligated to offer her man sex as part of her duties? You know, and there's 1,000 other questions. There's 1,000 other teachings and very typical social, religious, parental learnings that we pick up along the way around sex. And so the first thing to do is to look at myself and say, well, what are my beliefs about sex? How do I feel about sex? Do I have any emotional impacts around sex? You know, what pain bodies am I carrying into my sexual relationships? And so that's the first thing to look at, you know, and only you would know what your pain bodies are. But then you have to have a plan for healing those pain bodies, for healing your personal relationship around sex. And sometimes it's important to take a hiatus, to take a break from sex, or a sexual fasting, if you will, a period of celibacy. And even if you're in a relationship, you know, and you identify pain bodies that are impacting the sexual aspect of the relationship, then you have to sit down with your partner and say, hey, look, I realize that this happened to me, or, you know, as you know, this happened to me, or I realized that I learned these things, or I picked up these things, and this is part of my blockage with sex. Okay, and communicate that freely. You know, if you're not in a relationship where you can talk openly about sex, that's also something to look at. You know, we'll get into that in a second. But right now what we're dealing with is healing the pain body around sex. So if you're in a relationship and you need to take this time of celibacy, then you need to communicate that with your partner, because ultimately it's something that's going to serve you and your partner in the future. Because if you heal your sexual pain body and they can heal their sexual pain body, then the sex is going to be better, because the connection will be deeper. The intimacy will be more authentic, because there's less filters. There's less baggage in between you guys. So when we want to heal the sexual pain body, the very, very, very basic and very important lesson of forgiveness comes into play. You know, sometimes we experience sexual shaming in different ways, and sometimes it's not even like I remember, we were in 8th grade, and spring had just started, and Nidia Diaz was having a pool party at her house. And I don't remember why, but my friend Phil, something happened that they had to wash his underwear in the laundry machine. And somebody saw that his underwears were like size small. Something silly. Oh my goodness. That became this huge rumor, and it became this huge thing. And Phil, you know, we were in 8th grade, but, you know, there was a week or so there, you know, as terrible as we can be when we're that age, where Phil just suffered endless shaming. You know, and now that I'm older, I wonder how that impacted him in the years to come, because, you know, I also remember a story, and a great book to read is the Vagina Monologues, both for men and women. It's a fantastic book to read. And so in that book, it talked about one woman's early experience when she was young, in her adolescence. She had an orgasm, and she released a lot of fluid from her body. And when she did that, the young man that she was with didn't know how to respond, and you know, was kind of disgusted and you know, thrown off, probably intimidated by what happened. And he said things that shamed her and caused her. So sometimes the shaming isn't something as direct as, you know, you are this or you are that, but it could have been an experience, a moment. So when we go back, it's important to forgive those people that were maybe acting out of innocence or ignorance. You know, they had no true malintention. And then to forgive ourselves for accepting that shaming or accepting that branding, you know, or allowing ourselves to forgive ourselves for us taking value away from self. And then, of course, in any more experiences have to be forgiven, whether it's your parents, whether it was somebody that abused you, and trust factors. So, for example, if you were in a relationship and the woman was very aggressive towards you, or the man was very aggressive towards you, that creates trust issues that play into our sexual pain body. So that's an awareness that we have to have, is how am I able to trust in a relationship, and observe how that comes back into the sexual intimacy. Because many times sex can be one-sided for both of us. You know, you know, the partner's looking to achieve something and you're looking to achieve something, but you're not necessarily looking to achieve the same thing together. And we have to see how it is. So, for example, a man who has had difficult relationships and relationships of difficult trust, something very common is for this man to be sexually aggressive, or aggressive in the act of sex. But that's pretty much the one single mode that they operate in, because they're always trying to get something back. You know, they're trying to demonstrate something or prove something. And that's just an example. So we have to look at the trust issues from past relationships and how are they playing into our sexual pain. And so we have to do this review of relationships, of events, of situations, of people, of moral code that we may have learned and picked up along the way. and discard anything that doesn't serve us. Let go of any ill memories from the past. Be willing to forgive those people, those situations, and forgive ourselves, and release all that so that we can heal our sex pain, so that that pain can then become pleasure. So then our sex bodies can be whole, can be complete. So healing is key, is paramount to having personal connection with yourself. Okay, and the first step in having a sexual connection is having that personal connection with self. And again, the first step to that is healing that the pain body that's around your sexual perspective, your own personal sexual connection. You know, and then we have to look at habits. Okay, so for example, a very typical habit that we have is that women will exchange sex for love and men will offer love in exchange for sex. And a lot of this is because we see sex as a goal, as kind of like a destination that we arrive to. But really, as we said in the beginning, sex is just a waypoint. Sex should be something that you come to along your journey, like a nice cafe or a beautiful outlook or this secret spot on a beach or by a river. It's something that you arrive to, you enjoy that moment, and then you move on and you continue that journey until maybe some other time when you reach another point of sexual encounter. But when we are exchanging, when we're offering something, it means that we're lacking. I want to give you love because I need sex. Or I need love, so I'm going to give you sex. And really what we're doing there is we're robbing ourselves of personal empowerment. We are robbing ourselves of the ability to be authentic, to transact without a payoff or a debt. So when we're looking for sex, we have to see, why am I looking to have sex? Even if you've been married for 30 years with this person, if we're here, it's for a reason. It's to improve, it's to evolve. So no matter how long standing your current relationship may be, there's always space for evolution within the relationship. There's always space for growth. There's always space to empower yourself, to empower your partner, to empower the relationship, to gain more confidence in yourself, to gain more confidence in your partner. There's always space to gain more confidence in the relationship. So in order to gain this confidence, we have to look at the reasons why. And if we find that I'm looking to have sex because I need to demonstrate something or prove something, or I can only, for example, I can only demonstrate to my partner my worth by giving them sex, or I can only demonstrate to my woman my masculinity by the act of sex. I can only find confidence in my relationship by giving sex or receiving sex. So when we find that our mind is creating reasons or needs for sex, we need to observe these needs and remove our attachment from them. Understanding that these needs are really just symptoms of something deeper, a disconnection between the heart and the spirit. It could be a lacking of self-confidence. There's an absence somewhere that we need to fill in order to remove these attachments where we feel we need to receive or give sex based on some kind of contractual obligation, because there is no obligation when it comes to sex. So when we look at lovemaking and sex, there's a very key difference here, because we should always be making love with ourselves, with our partner, with our children, with our co-workers, with our relatives. Because the act of making love is just that. We might as well say creating love, okay? You create environments, spaces, memories, moments. And this is particularly key in relationships. Because if, for example, and I think women identify with this more than men do, because it just seems to happen more, but it's equally pertinent to men. When you're in a relationship where there's animosity, or where there's constant fighting or bickering, it's very difficult to be passionate at a deep, intimate level. So it's important to have that practice of making love, of intimacy in everything that we do, especially in a relationship. It's important to create together, to create memories, to create moments, to create adventures, life projects, personal goals, and to create trust, confidence, certainty is so important in a relationship. And a simple way of doing that is simply by doing what we say we're going to do. You know, if you and a current partner or a future partner come to an agreement, then do what you say you're going to do, because that demonstrates that you're a person of your word. But more importantly, it demonstrates to your partner that you're a person that they can trust, that they can confide in. And all these little blocks, these are like little building blocks. They create this beautiful bed chamber, if you will, an energetic bed chamber. So when we're talking about making love and we're talking about creating together, we're talking about simple things, you know, like the grocery list, like creating a separation of responsibilities. You know, who's responsible for the dog? Who's responsible for grocery shopping? Cooking meals together, sharing meals together, going out and doing things together other than just watching TV. You know, maybe you take a class together. Maybe it's a dance class or a yoga class or a qigong class. You know, maybe it's a cooking class. Drawing together, writing poetry, writing songs, making music, listening to music, dancing together. These are all things that are part of making love. Having the harmony in the home is so important, because it's difficult, nearly impossible, to settle into yourself, to open yourself up and receive another person and go into another person and have them come into you if the environment is static, if the environment is aggressive. So the environment, you will find, is key to finding fulfillment in everything: your work environment, your home environment, the bed chamber, where you meditate, where you walk, where you hang out, who you hang out with. All these environments carry energies, and all these energies, a residual of that energy will carry with you. So it's important to, at the very least, for the home to be harmonious. Of course we have disagreements. Of course we have arguments. But the question is, how frequently? To what degree? You know, if I'm with a woman and when we argue she disrespects me, it's very hard for me to open up at an intimate spiritual level to her sexually, you know. So what you want is to have balance, you know, to recover from the arguments in peace, to have solutions, resolution, and reconciliation. In the home, especially if you have already in a relationship, if it's possible, Osho taught something that I really enjoyed, and I'm not, especially since this is a sex talk, I'm not for or against Osho. There's things that he taught that I appreciate, and there's things that he taught that I don't agree with. But one thing that he mentions is having a love chamber. And this is a chamber where a lot of this creativity can be explored, where the act of sex can take place, where there's never an argument in this love chamber. It's only a chamber for meditating, for harmony, for dance, for co-creation, for collaboration, for coexistence. Sex is, again, it's a waypoint that we pass by. You know, there should never be an expectation just because it's an anniversary or a birthday, or just because we had this amazing day, we have to have sex. No, it needs to be, because believe it or not, there's times that men aren't in the mood for sex either. But if your woman is asking for sex, it's very hard for a man to say, I'm not in the mood, because we're the man. We have to always be present. And that's just not true. You know, men, like women, we have to give ourselves permission and give our partner permission that when we're not in the mood for sex, it's okay, no matter what's going on through the day. There has to be a space for intimate play without the expectation of sex, where you guys can do gentle things, anything from like a foot rub to giving each other full body massages and being intimate without the expectation, the demand of sex. You know, if you get to that part, great. If all you did was explore each other's body in a loving way and replenish each other's body in a loving way, that's also fantastic, because that's making love. It's very important that when we're in a relationship to be very clear about sex with our partners and to listen to them as well. And you have to be realistic, okay? If your sexual appetites don't match, there's only so much that you can change as a person, and there's only so much that they can change as a person, okay? So you have to have an awareness and a clarity of communication of where each person is at sexually, what they expect, what they need, what you can offer realistically. That's important. It's important to have a clear line of communication when it comes to sex. Sex is something that is very sacred, okay? No matter how wild, how kinky the sex may be, both you and your partner should always hold a space in your heart of love, of respect, and of connection for each other. Knowing that whatever is happening sexually is a co-created experience, and we should never judge ourselves afterwards. You know, it's important that men give women permission to feel comfortable in their bodies and what's happening in the act of sex, and for women to give their men the same permission as well. Now, there's a lot that we can do as far as developing our spiritual connection to sex, but the most basic fundamental thing is understanding that all sex that's done in love and respect is sacred. There's a beautiful tantric teaching that says that you will reach enlightenment when you can taste the sweet sacredness of the divine in a rotting corpse. So what does this mean in terms of sex? It means that all sex can be dirty or filthy, and all sex can be sacred and beautiful. What makes the difference is where are we placing our heart in that connection. When we talk about sacred sex, I find it important to invoke the Holy Spirit, to invite the Divine Mother, the Divine Father, to invite the angels and the archangels into the space, into the energy, to guide the connection, to guide the love. It's important, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to meditate before every time you guys have sex. You know, there's moments of passion and there's moments when, hey, the moment just opens up and that's what it is, right? But it's also important to have an awareness of how are we practicing our sexual practice. You know, is it all just pure flesh and passion? Or are we invoking celestial beings? Are we dedicating that sexual energy to something? Okay, because you can also offer sex as an intention to the earth, to the healing of women, to the healing of men, to the healing of your family. Sex magic is very strong. And the way to activate sex magic is through consciousness. Now, if you want to develop more sexual practices along a spiritual discipline, I'm going to send you guys some books, because I don't have the exact titles here, that you can use that help guide the spiritual consciousness of sex, because in 90 minutes we can't get it all in, okay? But there's practices that you can do to connect more with yourself and more with your partner to come into a sacred sex. But in this, we have to recognize the self as sacred. You and your sexuality and your being are sacred. It doesn't matter if you're a transvestite, if you're gay, if you're bisexual, if you're heterosexual. All this is sacred. But you have to recognize that you are sacred. Because again, just like everything else we've been talking about and everything else that we're going to talk about in this series, it all starts with you. Your personal view, your personal perspective, your own lens of yourself. We have to let go of any feelings of shame, any feelings of dirty. You know, if you have to be comfortable in asking your partner and in giving to your partner, okay? If you want to explore and any fantasy, I don't want to give examples, but any fantasy that comes to mind, from something very simple to something very erotic, you should cultivate your relationship to the point where you're both comfortable talking about this, exploring it, asking and receiving, releasing all those feelings of shame, all those feelings of guilt, because there's nothing in sex to be shameful over. If you were caught masturbating when you were a child, that was perfectly natural. That was perfectly normal. You know, if one day you were with a woman and you couldn't get an erection, or you were with a man and you just couldn't, it doesn't matter. You understand? It doesn't matter if there was a moment where you couldn't get turned on, or it doesn't matter if there was a moment when you were exploring sexuality and somebody shamed you. That's in the past. Liberate yourself from that so you can release and heal your sexual pain body, and just let that go. Okay. To recalibrate your sexuality, like we were saying, a sexual fast can be done. You can also do a food fast. You can set intentions in any ceremony that you go to. You can talk about your sex and your sexual perspective within your prayers to the Creator, and watch as messages are brought to you. Watch as feelings are liberated, as they're let go. And practicing that forgiveness is really important, is really key. So it's important to understand also the environment of sex, okay? So for example, some of the first environments of sex are the heart, the mind, and the physical body. So in the heart, I have to have love and respect for myself. I have to have love and respect for my partner, okay? In the body, I should take care of my body, exercise, eat well, bathe well, and love my body, respect my body, and ask that my body be respected by my sexual partners. The environment that we have sex in is also very important. Like for example, I'm on the road a lot, and for me, the opportunity to have sex is it's far in between sometimes, because of the ceremonies, and we keep the diet. So sometimes you are on the road, and sometimes you have a week off, and this is the time to have sex if it comes up. So whether you're on the road or at home, it's important to sage, to use copal, to smudge the environment, to cleanse it. If you can set up an altar or crystals, it's important that the places where you have sex be beautiful places. And I understand sometimes passion kicks up, but it's important to have an awareness. I'm not telling you not to have sex in the backseat of your car if it comes up. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, be aware of where you're allowing yourself to have sex, or where you're bringing your partner to have sex. Just have an awareness of that environment, because remember, we can't see everything that's going around us. And sometimes some environments have energetic bodies around them that can cling on to us, that can interfere with us. So it's important to have an awareness of the space that we're having sex in, okay? And now the mind. The mind is very important in sex, because we want to have conscious sex. We want to have connected, intimate, authentic sex, okay? And so for example, if pornography is something that is a part of our life, we have to understand that pornography is really poison. It devalues the human being. It devalues the divine goddess. It devalues the divine God in men and women. And we have both energies inside of us. So it's important to understand also, for example, drugs, or sex toys. If we're looking for external stimulation, because that's the only way we can get off, that's the only way we can engage in passion, then there needs to be a recalibration. I'm not saying that sex toys are bad. I'm just saying if it's the only way, or if it's the majority of the way that you're connecting with your partner or with yourself sexually, there's something there that's off balance. Because playing is fun, and exploring is fun, but if you need it, you understand, if there's a dependency that's been built on it, then it's not serving you. And pornography never serves us. You know, I've been there. I've seen it. I've heard it. Oh, you know, we use it as sexual stimulation. But you have to think about it. You're looking at these two other people engaging in a non-love-making sexual act. And then you want to bring love into your relationship and connection. So that's why sometimes a reset is necessary. You know, starting from zero, a sexual fast is necessary. Pornography and drugs are poison to the sexual body. They're poison to intimacy, and they're poison to an authentic connection between sexual partners. When we look at sex and also how we feel that sex is sacred, we have to look at the reward and punishment concept of sex. Many times, if a guy is good, he'll get sex, and if he's bad, he won't get sex. You know, or if a woman, you know, gets her man upset, maybe he'll go have sex with another woman. And we play these crazy games with sex, and sex is a nuclear power. It's the power of creation. You know, it's the one way that humans can immediately imitate, mimic, or reflect the energy of the divine of God. We come together and we have the free will if we're going to use sex for pleasure or if we're going to use it for procreation to bring life forth. So when we have sex, we have to be aware, am I using this as a reward and punishment mechanism? And remove that from your life. Remove that from your relationship. Remove that from the behavior. You know, because again, reward and punishment goes to expectations, attachments. It creates lack of certainty, lack of trust. And when we're having sex, it's very important. This goes back to pornography. This goes back to the sacred space of sex in the mind. If you're having sex with Bob or with Mary, it's them. Okay, that's the person that you're there with. If you're fantasizing about someone else, you're basically having a form of sexual masturbation. You're just using that person's body to satisfy your sexual need. And this goes back to the mind space, because now you're using one person physically and sexually, right? And then you're linking to another person energetically and taking their energy as well. This is why fantasizing about a person, and it's more common with men than women, but we have to be, if you're fantasizing about a person and you don't have their permission to fantasize about them, you're stealing their energy. And then if you're in a relationship and you're fantasizing about someone else, you're opening the door into your relationship for confusion and doubt to come in. You're calling that into your life. And this is where cheating comes up. This is where uncertainty in the relationship comes up. If your relationship isn't sexually satisfying, but you have a satisfying relationship, it can be worked on. Like I said, there's many books and many courses that you can take as individuals and as couples to elevate the frequency and the vibration and the passion in your sex life. When we talk about sexual spirituality, along those lines, for women, there's also the moon ritual. As women become more familiar with the moon time and they become more intimate with the earth, their womb trauma heals, their sexual channels become open. For men, we can do earth offerings. You can go by a river, by a beach, or in nature somewhere, and you can lay down fruits. You can lay down flowers that you picked and give them as an offering to the earth. You can lay down tobacco. You can lay down cacao. You can have a fire. Both men and women can have a fire, and you can make offerings to the fire. And you can make these offerings to heal your sexual energy, to heal a sexual connection, or offerings as forgiveness. You can make offerings to the Divine Mother and the Sacred Father, asking them for healing in your sexual relationships, in your sexual body, in any kind of sexual addiction that you feel that doesn't serve you. So we have prayer, we have rituals, we have fasting, and we have other books and courses that we can look to edify our understanding, our knowledge of sex, and to deepen our connection with ourselves, with our creator, and with our sexual partner. The mind is probably the greatest sex organ. Okay. So when we think about sex, we have to understand, how are my actions, my words, and my thoughts impacting my mind and the mind of my partner? Okay, because when we make love at home, we have to support each other. We have to listen to each other. Okay, we have to have a clean home. Having cleanliness in the home is so important for a relationship. It's so important for sex. Making sure the house is clean, making sure that your body's clean, that your heart is clean, that your mind is clean. And what are you feeding yourself, and what are you feeding your partner? Not just nutritionally, but energetically. How do you guys feed into each other? What are the dependencies of the relationship? Is there a balance in the relationship? Because in order to have sexual empowerment, you have to feel that the relationship is balanced. If you feel that you're overly dependent on the person, or the person is overly dependent on you, that's going to be reflected in the sex chamber. When you have sex, that imbalance will come into play. So a lot of times we think sex is just about the act of sex, how much pleasure can we give each other? How good can I make my man feel? Or how good can I make my woman feel? And we think it's just down to that, down to those sexual moments. But it's really not. It's everything that you do before and after that really build the foundation for what you're going to experience sexually. After sex, because sex is magical, we are creating energy, and we're sharing energy in sex. So it's very important, the aftercare that we give each other after sex. Everybody has habits. Some people are very thirsty after sex. Some people want to cuddle. Some people want to talk. Some people just want to lay there in stillness. So it's important to know what your partner needs after sex and what you need, and how you both can give yourselves aftercare. It's important. And this is one of the reasons, after sex, it's so important to have physical touch. The body releases endorphins and phytochemicals that can only be activated through human skin-to-skin contact. And they're most readily available during the moments right after sex. So this is a really important moment to caress each other, hold each other's hair, take in each other's pheromones really deep, and settle with one another. Rapé is beautiful before and after sex. I have to say that the rapé prayer before and after sex is a fantastic tool to use, especially, and there's moments, you can set the scene, you can set the stage. If you guys want to have a night dedicated to sex magic and full awareness, you can set candles, an altar, pictures of divine beings, have a rapé prayer, a meditation, dance, massage, laugh. Laughter is so important. Sometimes we take sex so serious, and that's why that communication is so important. Because, like, for example, sometimes we fart during sex, just like we fart during yoga, and sometimes a woman is really turned on, and you're in the mix, and all of a sudden she's not into it anymore, and sometimes a guy is ready to give her full pleasure, and 20 seconds later it's over. And we have to accept all that and be okay with all that and not take it personal. And if we have that confidence and that clear communication and that joy in the relationship, then it's all going to be fun. It's all going to be great. Something that I don't agree with, that I've been exploring recently in my life, many people, like, you'll have an argument and then you'll have makeup sex. I think it's better to wait, at least a day, for all that energy to pass by, because we don't want to use sex as a bomb, as a healing bomb. It can be. I mean, there's moments when we're emotionally down and sex is good. But if you have a fight or an argument, sex is not the way to bring it back together, because then that becomes the habit. You understand? You want to be able to heal that argument through dialogue, through touch, through laughter, by changing the frequency, by forgiving, by coming to an understanding. And then once all that energy's passed and it's the next day, then, go ahead and have some sex. That's a recommendation. That's something that I'm exploring in my life right now, and I'm finding that it works very well, which is why I feel very good about recommending it at this point. Definitely, it's much better to come together a day after the argument, I have found so far. So when it comes to also aftercare, we have to think about after talk. What are we going to talk about in those first few minutes or that first hour after sex? We have to be careful, because we're both sensitive, and sometimes you can be made to feel like, oh, I got sex because, in my case, she wanted this or she needed that, or, so be very careful about what you're talking about after sex. It's not a good time to bring up that thing. It's not. That thing can wait till about an hour later and then bring it up. Because I know the times that I've had arguments after sex is just horrible. Who wants that, right? Who wants to have an argument after being intimate with your partner? So having an awareness, this is why the energy that we're bringing into the moment that we have sex and the energy that we're cultivating after we have sex is so important to increase the harmony, to increase the connection, to increase the connectivity, all that. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, so sexuality. Let me stop for a moment. I'm gonna, if you guys have a question, I don't have, our director of production isn't here. She's with our teacher. So, okay, I've got my chat window up. So if you have a question, just type your name into the chat window and I will unmute you. And if you're calling in from a phone, we have one phone. I'm gonna unmute you now. If you have a question, hello, 856? Can you hear me? Okay, well, no. Does anyone else have a question up until now? I don't see anything here. Okay. About porn, I missed it. Okay, so the first question is about pornography. Bueno, I will review a little bit and then you can go back in the recording and listen to it all. Pornography is a poison. It gives us the wrong image of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. It makes us think that men have to behave one way sexually and women another. And it makes us think that men only want one thing and women only want another. And that sex is something that is a way of relieving aggression or expressing dominance. It also creates memes in the mind. And those memes come back and create lust that isn't a healthy lust. It's not a lust of love, but rather it's just a love of pleasure. And any lust of pleasure for the sake of pleasure alone isn't healthy. It creates addiction, it creates separation, and it can also create, the person becomes isolated. So there's a lot of danger with pornography. The next question is from Francisco. How is one to develop a spiritual connection with sex while single? That's a great question. So here's where we go into self, Francisco, okay? We develop all the prayers. You have the prayer of meditation, the prayer of the rituals, the earth offerings. You have the study that you can do. You can study Tantra. You can study Kundalini. And I'm going to send a list of those other books in the email with the link. So the way, when we're alone, the way that we connect with ourselves sexually is through spirit, through the spiritual practice. By taking our sexual energy and in meditation and placing it there in the meditation and giving it to God and saying, okay, my dear creator, I've got all this energy. Show me what to do with it. Show me how to cycle it through my chakras. And then the books, the courses, the right situations will come up. The right moments, the right meditations will come to you. Because the first thing we have to do in order to receive is ask. But we have to ask in knowing that we're going to receive it. Have that faith in the creator and place your spiritual discipline first. Through that spiritual discipline, your sexual channels will open, your sexual knowledge will open, Okay, so this is how we work on ourselves when we have no partner. Creating the environment, keeping our home clean, you know, and practicing self-love, writing with yourself, poetry, dancing, cooking for yourself, being the most romantic partner you can be to yourself. And then two beautiful things happen when you have someone in your life. You know how to be the most beautiful romantic partner that you can be because you've given it to yourself. And you know what you expect. You know what you want because you've already given it to yourself. And you shouldn't settle for anything less, ever. Let's see. V wants me to write a book. Um, yeah, maybe one day. Maybe one day. I had a teacher of mine that wrote a book one time called "How to Have Killer Orgasms at Any Age, Even If You Don't Deserve It." And maybe I'll follow up with that. Thank you, V, for the hugs and kisses. Okay, so there's no other questions. Okay, we got another one. Yes, Cynthia. So Cynthia says that once you develop your spiritual discipline and understanding, finding that partner should be interesting. It becomes very interesting because through the law of affinity and attraction, as you're preparing your vessel, you're preparing all the energy, you're preparing your house, you're creating the space for that partner to come in and meet you. That's why it's so important not to settle. That's why it's so important that if you're in a lousy relationship that's toxic, that's not fixable, that you both walk away from it in peace. But you have to create space in your life to receive the absolute best. Now, if that's a person that you're with and you can both get there, absolutely great. If you have to leave that person and find another person, that's absolutely great. But remember, whether you're with someone else or not, the first person you have to find is yourself. Okay, so William says here, when you show another unconditional love and they may understand and seek physical relationship, how do you respond? That, William, is a case by case basis, and I'll give you I'll give you two examples. I had a friend of mine who was a dear friend who I loved very much, who was infatuated with me and just couldn't. And this person was very attractive, but there was no. My attraction to them was like a brotherly love, and ultimately I lost that relationship because the person couldn't respect my boundaries. So the first thing that we want to talk about is boundaries, and so this will lead me to my second example, which was quite the opposite. You know, similar situation, but the person understood the boundaries and could live with them. Also, we have to be aware of how we're expressing ourselves. You know, if we know that the person is emotionally vulnerable, you know, and you'll know this from the conversation they're having with you, you don't want to be overly loving, especially with your words, you know. Um, so we have to have, first with them, we have to be clear within ourselves what are the boundaries. We have to be clear with that person what the boundaries are. Okay, and if they can't accept that, then that relationship can't continue. You know, you can't be in that person's life because they're not ready to meet you where you're at. You know, and that's just the truth. Whether it's a client, a patient, a friend, a relative, people have to respect your boundaries, just like you have to respect other people's boundaries. You know, and you have to meet people where they're at. They also have to be willing to meet you where you're at. Does that help, William? Just let me, if not, I can go into it further. If it helps, just type a yes there for me. Okay, guys, so there's no more questions at this time. So sexuality. Sexuality is about you. What is your sexuality? What do you enjoy sexually? And being comfortable with that. Being accepting of yourself sexually. If you're a very sexual person, then, you know, just like you have other spiritual goals and disciplines, you have to see where you direct that sexual energy. If you want less, then take the spiritual measures that you need to reduce that sexual energy and give it to the creator so it can flow somewhere else. If you don't have a lot of sexual energy and you want more sexual energy, then you have to pray and ask the creator for that. Okay, because there might be things in your life that are nutrition based or exercise based or environmentally that are creating this lack or this overage. Or maybe you're happy with a lack and an overage. The important thing is when it comes to your sexuality is that you have to be at peace with it. You cannot take into account what other people think about your sexuality. You cannot take into account what society or religion says about your sexuality, because God gave you everything that you have and that you are for your lesson and your experience. It doesn't mean that what you are is right or wrong. It doesn't mean that it's perfect or imperfect. It means that you have exactly what you need to learn and receive the lessons that you came to this earth to learn and receive. And you have to explore that, okay? Of course, everything has to be explored in a responsible way, in a way that doesn't cause damage to others. It doesn't cause hurt to others. If you feel you have aggressive sexual tendencies, and by aggressive, I don't mean just physical. They could be like psychological too, like you just take or you just want, it's just a way to satisfy yourself. This is something that has to be spiritually healed. This is part of the pain body and the sex. So your sexuality belongs to you and no one else. You share it with the world. You share it with others. But you have to be in acceptance and in reconciliation and in balance with your own sexuality. The best way that I have found to do that is through spiritual practice, through fasting, meditation, going to plant ceremonies, yoga, breath work, all these qigong, all these beautiful energetic practices. When you take them seriously and you do them with consciousness, they will support the whole totality of your spiritual path, including the aspect of sex and sexuality. Soulmates. Okay, so let's clarify a few things, okay? So now what I'm going to talk here, this I've only read, okay? So I don't have a divine confirmation, but it seems to be true because it's written through many different disciplines. There's something that's called the twin flame, okay? And many times we confuse the twin flame with the soulmate. And so it's said that when your soul was created, it was literally divided in two. And you and your twin flame came to earth. And it says that in your very first human incarnation, you met and you were together, just so that you would know that there was another one of you out there in the world, in this existence. And they say that from that point on, the twin flames separate over lifetimes, thousands of years. And they say that we only come together once or twice more, that we meet many times, but sometimes when we meet, we're relatives. So there's no opportunity to be in intimate relationship. Or we meet and we're friends. And maybe we have a romantic connection and we feel that this person is the love of my life, but you guys aren't ready in this lifetime to be together. So there's a lot of ways that we come across our twin flame. And they say that in the very final human incarnation, you and your twin flame will come together one more time before leaving the work on earth. So that's the twin flame. The soulmate. The soulmate is anyone. Your dog could be your soulmate. It's any living being, any sentient being that you've created a soul contract with before coming back to earth. Okay. So soulmates aren't just people that you have a romantic relationship with. Soulmates are any significant relationship in your life, especially those that have had a hand in shaping you and that you've had a hand in shaping others. So this is the soulmate contract. Now, obviously, we want to romantically be. Oh, we got a question here. Are there many soulmates but only one twin flame? That would seem to be the case, V. It would seem to be the case that we have many soulmates, we have many contracts that we make, but only one twin flame. So how do we find, guys, what I like to do is I like to pray. I find that prayer is the ultimate solution. So again, instead of praying for what I want and being blessed to receive that, I pray to surrender and receive what is best for me to achieve my highest purpose. So that includes the partner that I have in my life. Our relationship is a result of this prayer. And it's a continued prayer because once you get the relationship, so first we prepare the house, right? You have to have room in your house for another person. And what is the house? Like when we spoke about that lady that had her house full of stuff and wanted a partner, but she realized that she needed to make room in her house for that partner. We need to make room in our mind. We need to make room in our heart. We need to make room in our body. We need to make room in our life for a soulmate. You know, yes, it's important for the person to accept you as who you are, for what you are. But it's also important for you to be willing to be flexible. You know, if for example, my partner is 17 years younger than me, but if she says something to me that makes perfect sense, why am I going to stroke up an ego about it? You know, you have to make room for another person in your life, and that means you have to be willing to make changes. You know, in the light of convincing evidence, you should be willing to make a decision in favor of that evidence. You know, so it's important, right? It's like a fine line, because the person has to accept you and not try to change you. But there's things about you that you can change as a reflection of this relationship that improve you. Then by all means, make the changes. And this is the thing in a relationship. You have to understand that you're now bringing two lives together. So a lot of compromise has to be made. There has to be an appetite for learning together. So these are the things. If we want to have a soulmate in our life, we need to make room in our life. If you're already in a relationship, how you look at that person is so important. You know, if you look at them with beautiful eyes, if you think about them with beautiful thoughts, if you speak about them with beautiful words, this person will be beautiful to you. But if you're constantly picking apart their flaws, if you're constantly picking apart their character, then that's what that person is going to be to you. And only you know the truth of it. I mean, if the person is, you know, if the person is really not healthy, not toxic, why are you with them? You know, they're not your broken bird to fix. And if the person is good, and if you are happy and you are in love, then don't pick them apart. You know, edify them. But it all starts with your perspective. If you're in love with someone, see them through that love. See them as beautiful. See them as a divine gift in your life. Behave towards them that way. If you're not with anyone, behave towards yourself that way. And make room in your life to receive a divine gift. You know, if we're hanging out at bars, if we're watching pornography, if we're doing drugs, if we work all day long, this is your environment. You know, how can you meet a soulmate that's really going to edify you if this is the environment that you're in? You know, have an awareness of where you're spending your time. You can say, oh, well, I work all day. But that's not good either, because then there's no time in your life for another person. And you want that person to come into your life and accept your schedule, accept your busyness, and still be with you, and make time for you when you have it, and you'll make time for them when you have it. That's a casual relationship. That might be friends with benefits, but it's not a soulmate connection. We have to do the work beforehand, and we have to do the work once we get there. Because a soulmate relationship is like having a tree in the garden of God. It requires divine care. You have to give it water, attention. You have to give it fertilizer. If it's sick, you have to take care of it. If it's healthy, you have to praise it and appreciate it. So the big thing about relationships, it's not caring what other people think about your relationship. It's very important in your relationship to have an awareness of who are you bringing into your relationship with you, who are you bringing into the bedchamber with you. Your parents cannot come into your relationship. Your teacher, your advisors, your best friend, none of them can come into your relationship. Your relationship is between you, the other person, and God. And if you want a healthy, happy, thriving relationship, keep it that way. Because other people are going to give you their opinions, and they're not there. They're going to give you ideas that are going to confuse you, and they don't have to deal with the consequences or the results. If habits, cultural learnings, patterns from the past are influencing, in fact, impacting your relationship, you have to let them go. You have to tell your mom goodbye. You know, mom, goodbye, I'm going to go down on my man. Dad, goodbye, I'm going to go down on my woman. And have fun, you know, and they cannot be there, okay? And that's so important for a soulmate relationship, that it have first your connection to yourself, your connection to the person, and your connection to the divine. We have to make room in our life for this. If you have a relationship and you want it to grow, have an awareness of how you think of the person, how you treat the person, and how you speak about and to the person. Okay? If we see each other as divine, we will treat each other as divine, and then we'll be divine. And that's the beauty of it. It's really that simple. If we look at ourselves as beautiful, and we look at our partner as beautiful, and we think beautiful, act beautiful, and speak beautiful, then it will be beautiful. Okay, guys, I'm going to open up again for questions. Are there any questions at this time? Okay, here we have a question. Invite when you're ready to entirely receive, and not invite just to fill a void. Cynthia, that makes a beautiful point. Cynthia just gave us something that's very beautiful. She said, invite when you're ready to entirely receive, and not invite just to fill a void. And this is important, and I'm glad you brought that up, and we'll close with this. Many times in my life, I've been nomadic, and I've been a hermit. And it's been great for me spiritually, but when the night comes, there can be a lot of loneliness. Okay, and loneliness can be very tricky because sometimes it drives us to complacency, or to, like Cynthia said so well, to fill the void. So when there's a void, there's an absence, and again, we want to fill this absence with light, with love. There's things you can do as well. In the nighttime, it can get lonely, so what I would do is I would invite friends over for dinner, or I would go to a friend's house, or go to a class late at night. Make sure that you have books, study courses at home, movies that you can watch. Because Sarah is right. You want to only invite to receive when you're entirely ready, not before that. Guys, the divine in me honors and recognizes the divine in you. Thank you so much for being here. I love you all. I will send you that list of books with the link for the review. God bless you, and God is protect you always. Thank you, guys. I love you.